In terms of benefits, broadly speaking, market segmentation is important to both the marketer or the business and, of course, the customer. In terms of deployment of resources, we can look at the firm in that regard and all the benefits that we've listed. And, of course, for the customer, it provides opportunity to go for exactly what will satisfy their need. This is also useful, market segmentation is also useful in terms of business-to-business marketing. Different institutions have different needs or expectations when it comes to even equipments for the use in the office, depending on the needs of the business. Other businesses servicing these firms will have to tailor their marketing mix element or the product to satisfy such organizations. So what we are saying is that market segmentation, the importance of market segmentation cannot be overemphasized. It's useful in all kinds of entities, being it small, big, profit, non-profit, private, government, business to business, local, international, whether the company is new in the market, whether it's a typical service firm or good producing companies. All these entities have the need to practice market segmentation for obvious reasons, because the marketplace is made up of consumers with heterogeneous needs, and we cannot equally serve all consumers in this kind of market. So it's an important starting point. Like I said, in trying to implement the marketing concept, I did mention in earlier section that one has to do consumer research, based on which we move on to do market segmentation. We go on to target because of some of the factors we'll be looking at very soon. And of course, when consumers are in the marketplace, they come with expectation. And it's through positioning that they're able to tell whether brand A has the needed benefits or characteristics they are seeking for in their goods and services. Now the question is, what are the determinants of effective segmentation or segments? We can assume that all segments may be effective. So we need to look at some factors that will help us describe a market segment as effective. Effective in terms of helping to achieve the benefits we've enumerated a few minutes ago. According to our good friend Kotler, 5 factors must be considered by the firm in its market segmentation decision making. These factors we'll touch on briefly and discuss below. One, we are saying that the segment must be measurable. In other words, it should be possible to estimate the segment in terms of numbers. That's a starting point for measuring profit and all that. So it should be possible to estimate the numbers in the market, who constitute the segment, and beyond that, their financial ability and their profile, because the profile, again, will help us know what we can do and what we cannot do, or how we can compete against other companies. So the market should be measurable in terms of numbers, in terms of even income level, by way of ability to pay or ability to buy. And of course, it should be possible to describe the segment in terms of who or those who constitute this segment. The segment, for a segment to also be considered effective, it should be accessible. In other words, it's not enough to identify a segment and say that you have so much numbers and that the ability to pay and all that. One should also consider the fact, or one should ask the question, is it possible to reach this segment through advertising and other promotional messages? Is it possible? It may be a potentially profitable segment, but if there's no way we can assess or reach this segment, then we cannot consider this segment as effective. Point 3, we need to look at how substantial the segment is. Here, our interest is, or the question we need to ask, is it worth serving this segment? The question is, again, the segment should have enough persons to be profitable. So it should be substantial. But of course, substantial in this regard is different, because different companies compete at different levels. I mean, there are market leaders, followers, and niche markets and all that. So some may take a niche market and considering all other factors and will still see it as very profitable. So substantial in this case is relative. And of course, we always talk of positioning. So it should be possible to differentiate the market. In other words, this segment that we decide to choose should be able to respond to different marketing mixes in different ways. I mean, we can't use the same marketing mix for all segments. So the market should be differentiable. It should be possible to describe, there should be certain characteristics or factors that will allow us to differentiate segment A from segment B. This is also an effective and important criteria or criterion for determining an effective market segment. In other words, if two different segments of the same market respond to a marketing mix in the same way, then there's no point or justification to treat them as different segments. There's no point. If they are likely to respond to the same product decisions, pricing decisions, people decision, physical evidence, place or distribution strategies, they are likely to respond the same way, then that will not be a good basis for market segmentation. So the segment has to be differentiable for it to be considered an effective segment. The fifth point here is that it should be actionable. In other words, for us to consider a segment useful, the resources of the company should make it possible for it to design appropriate marketing mix to satisfy the market segment. The company should have, it's not enough to say this segment is big. Has the company got what it takes to serve the market effectively? So that will fall under actionability of the segment. Now we want to talk about market segmentation in consumer markets. In section 1, we did mention that when we use the word consumers, we are referring to two consuming entities. But looking at the pervasive nature of the personal consumer, from this section on, we'll focus our attention on market segmentation in consumer markets. So for now, we are not discussing segmentation in institutional markets or business-to-business market or what have you. Segmenting consumer markets. A good review of literature reveals that there's no one best way of segmenting consumer markets. So different businesses or marketers will segment their market based on factors they consider important. Of course, there are a number of ways by which we can segment markets. In this regard, we are saying that there are several ways of segmenting consumer market, and that there's no one particular way that is an acceptable basis for segmenting consumer markets. In this regard, we can talk of four main bases that marketers use in real life in dividing or segmenting consumer markets. Again, though we are about to talk about four main bases, in real life, marketers often do not rely on only one basis for segmenting markets. Sometimes they combine one or two bases for segmenting market in order to effectively reach these segments. Let's now attempt to understand some basis for segmenting consumer markets. One, we can talk of geographic segmentation. This simply means segmenting a given market based on geographic variables. What is the idea? The idea is that people or consumers within a given geographical stratum tend to have similar tastes and preferences, tend to have similar lifestyle, cultural characteristics, and so on, tend to have same value, attitudes, and therefore tend to respond or have similar needs. And therefore, marketers can segment markets based on geographical variables. In geographic segmentation, the marketer may be interested in the population size of concentration, population size or concentration, the income, the general spending behavior of the population in the regions, towns, countries, and so on and so forth. And typically, when we talk of market geographic segmentation, we are talking about dividing the market using variables such as regions, countries, towns, communities, and all that. Sometimes based on their culture or unique history or climatic conditions, they tend to have similarities when it comes to certain goods and services. That is not to say all goods, everything in the marketplace, all services will have to be segmented based on geographical considerations. But it tends to be the case that when it comes to certain goods and services, geographical considerations have influence on consumer purchase decisions or consumption-related decisions. For instance, a company that decides to operate in various regions of Ghana, depending on what industry the company is considering, will have to develop different marketing mixes for the different regions as their needs may differ. When you take the catering or the hospitality industry, even here in Ghana, a small country like we have, members of various regions tend to differ in terms of their food preferences and what have you. So that can serve as a useful basis for segmenting the market. Typically, a firm using okay, we've talked about geographic segmentation. Let's talk about the second one, demographic segmentation. What do we mean by demographic segmentation? A typical firm using this segmentation basis will divide a market based on variables such as gender, education, age, family size, family life cycle, income, occupation, race, religion, generation, and nationality. These are all important bases for segmentation. Demographic segmentation is one of the most commonly used basis for segmentation, because all these variables that I've enumerated are good basis for segmenting several products and services across sectors or industries: education, age, family, income, occupation. All these are useful basis for segmenting market, and it's not easy to relate to these factors in a typical marketplace. I need to mention that among the four main bases for segmenting consumer markets, demographic variables are the most used basis for segmenting consumer markets for obvious reasons. The reasons being that the major reason is that it's easy to measure, and also is due to the fact that what the consumer needs or wants is largely dependent on demographic factors such as income. Age will also determine, as we go through the life cycle, depending on our age and other consideration, our tastes and preferences change along this spectrum. So geographic segmentation is very useful. Of course, gender, also an important demographic variable, is a basis for segmenting several goods and services. For instance, children toy makers often design different toys for the male child and different ones for the female child, as their needs and wants may be different. Sometimes color can even be an important mix in terms of segmentation, because sometimes researchers will tell you gender has something to do with certain colors. Male or female tend to be attracted to some particular colors and so on and so forth. So demographic segmentation is a very useful one that we need to pay attention to.